just another story of the same. You know, we're having a good time. Just be respectful, dudes, and never learn until it's too late.
Welcome back to the Baltimore Bureau podcast. I am Dharna and I'm here with my co-host Khalilah.
Hey, Dharna.
We should start by apologizing for the slight delay in getting out the podcast last week. Thanks for bearing with us. As you know, we are still in the beginning stages of this, but as we keep doing it, we will get better, and we would love to hear your suggestions. Tell us that you love it, and tell us that you hate it. Whatever you have to say.
Totally. Or not, but you know, we're gonna keep it moving.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep doing it whether or not you want us to. So we're going to start today with a piece from our reporters, Stephen Janis and Taya Graham. Is that right?
Yep. So which piece is this, daughter?
We got the Hazel Street piece.
Yes. Oh, so, you know, this story is interesting because in Curtis Bay, you really do have a group of people who are isolated from kind of the mainland of 100%. Baltimore, right? And when you consider the fact that access to working fire hydrants or even access to the presence of the mayor and elected officials who should be really supporting a part of the city can cause a community to really be left in both disrepair. And what I heard from this is, you know, really a feeling of despair in many ways.
It's so exactly what I wrote about the story was Curtis Bay so isolated builds despair. It's exactly what I said.
Which is interesting though, because you know the work of the kids, for example, at Ben Franklin High School and other folk, they are amazing people with so much hope for what their community can be, and it's really on the rest of the city to kind of step up.
Truly. But yeah, to your point, I believe that a woman said that there was no working fire hydrant around this.
Within 5 blocks or
Yeah,
something.
within 5 blocks. So here you'll hear about a part of a community that actually experienced a fire. And, you know, there was some injuries and some, you know, sustained damage to the neighborhood, both, you know, just physically and also psychologically for the folks there.
Yeah.
And they were using building awareness of this fire to... they were using this opportunity to build awareness and belief in this call for an affordable housing trust fund here in Baltimore. So again, to your point, this is not just a story of a neighborhood forgotten and a neighborhood in despair, but also a neighborhood like rising up and a tale of some really amazing people who are in this isolated area of Baltimore really trying to do something about it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we are a couple of weeks out now from the primary and talking about what issues elected officials should be focused on. And I think, you know, we heard from Nikki Fabricant, for example, about this very issue and how it also is an environmental concern, right? That if you don't have access to water to put out a fire and it spreads throughout a community, there are other implications for livability. And then also the Housing Affordability Trust to both rehab houses and also provide people with access to livable housing.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you shouldn't be getting sick still in 2018 from lead paint poisoning
100%.
Or any of those things that the young people are impacted by in that community. So, you know, that trust is important, and I think we will probably see it coming up again in the next legislative session in 2019 because people deserve a right to this. And I think the work of this coalition, United and Not Blighted, will be doing some heavy lifting to push this to the forefront. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so let's take a look.
Let's rise up. No more lies to us. We shall say no more.
They stood in a blistering July heat, committed to change.
It's not about the greed. That's the only thing these basic corporate leaders seem to see.
The backdrop, a row of homes that had burned down last year in Baltimore's Curtis Bay neighborhood that now sat vacant.
So last year on this date, July 3rd, there was a fire, and these houses, it spread. There wasn't a working fire hydrant for within 5 blocks. So the fire ended up spreading to all of the homes, destroying them, and now we are fighting to try to revitalize them.
So I went to my corner and I saw the black smoke and I just had to come down. sorry. Just to help, just to be here for whatever. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know how to help.
Neglect that these activists say was a symbol of the lack of affordable housing in a city that sorely needs it.
The city needs to step in and help. I mean, they're not concerned with Curtis Bay. We've noticed that the city doesn't come to Curtis Bay. I don't know if it's the bridge and the toll, but they're not present. They don't have a huge footprint. And for them to step in and just say, we are here for you, it makes a big difference.
The group United Not Blighted, a broad coalition of affordable housing advocates, say their plan to permanently finance two $20 million funds to address blight like this needs support.
We need affordable housing because they're working families, they're working people that still can't afford to live in housing.
The plan, called 2020, now has momentum, with the group having gathered enough signatures to place an amendment to the city's charter on the ballot. A move that would codify into law an affordable housing fund with a permanent funding mechanism. In 2016, the same coalition successfully passed an amendment to establish an affordable housing fund, but without a funding source.
You know, everyone deserves, like I said, a place to live, as well as, you know, just the basic need. You know, spread the wealth a little. You know, spread the wealth everywhere.
We asked the mayor's office for comment on if they support the charter amendment, but have not heard back. Still, there are concerns.
We're kind of waiting to see if the city will come through for us.
That a neighborhood of working class residents will be forgotten. And they hope that by banding together, this will not become a reality.
Can Baltimore be beautiful again?
Yes, we can.
Can Baltimore be beautiful again?
Yes, we can.
This is Taya Graham and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Curtis Bay, Maryland.
I just want to remind folks, if you're listening but not watching, that you should head over to therealnews.com and take a look at all of these stories. This story that Stephen and Taya did about Hazel Street has some really nice visuals. The music that you hear in the beginning is coming from folks who are actually a part of this action, so just head over to The Real News and check out the video too. And next we're going to move on to another local story that's, you know, again in an area far from where we are, but also far away from Curtis Bay, a completely different sort of isolated area. Mm-hmm. A Target in Cockeysville.
Yeah, we have a labor issue going on up there, and it's interesting because when you watch the video, you will see a stark contrast between the issues that are being lifted up and the people involved. So I'm interested to hear and read how listeners feel about allyship and, you know, who's involved in protests around labor issues. Also find it interesting that, you know, you also see different folk from Target stores in the region trying to coalesce around supporting fair labor practices even without a union.
Sure.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Mic check! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No peace!
No justice!
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 No peace! No peace! No justice! No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Justice!
No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
For the management of the STO, they need the. Yeah, I mean they want their demands from management.
I'm Easy Jackson for the Real News Network. We are at a Target in Baltimore County today where workers have taken action and made some demands against management here. Claims that management has been racist, ableist, and sexist. So workers decided today to hold an action inside the store. We're talking to those workers right now.
There's a myriad of issues here at Target that we've been experiencing. A lot of workers of color have been experiencing racism from some of the managers, two in specific. I don't know if you want me to name them, but...
You said their names inside. You can. What were their names?
Yeah. Letitia, George is specifically with sexual harassment. There's been several workers that have come to me. I don't want to name them, but he's had several charges of sexual harassment.
And George is a manager?
Yeah, he's a manager. And they have recently in the store, we have been complaining. I've taken legal action, so I filed a complaint with the NLRB against the STL. His name was Lance, and he basically we're out here on an unfair labor practice charge, strike.
Target is a company known for its anti-union practices, one of the largest retailers in the country that is often at odds with employee rights, which makes the action today by workers at this Baltimore County Target all the more remarkable.
We are not trying to unionize at this point. I think we're kind of one of the, I'm working directly with Adam, who's, he had a strike at his Target in Christiansburg, Virginia.
Okay.
And it was against a manager that was racist and sexually harassing workers. And they were successful in getting him fired.
I started working at Target over a year ago, and just through mutual friends and contacts, we had heard at this store of the head manager sexually harassing the women workers for years. He'd been there for over a decade, and we had heard, from workers, they tried to go through the internal channels that Target provided to hold him accountable, but it just seemed like every time they tried to report him that they would just get retaliated against, and he would keep his job and they would, get fired. So we felt it was necessary to take further action, so we organized a strike, and we went on strike last August with the main demand being his termination. And we were successful in that. By the second day of our strike, they removed him from his position as they conducted an internal investigation, and then it wasn't much long after that they decided that they were going to fire him and remove him.
Tired of poor working conditions, racism, ableism, and sexism, organizers gathered outside the store early this morning to hear concern from employees. The action is part of a broader plan by the Democratic Socialists of America to organize Target workers across the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened at this store, it's happened at my store. It just seems that Target rather just do the bare minimum to address these issues rather than, providing full accountability like the workers want. So instead of terminating the managers who deserve it, they transfer some of them out to other stores so they can continue with their abuse on other workers at other stores, and that's unacceptable.
We've went to managers, we've had one-on-one conversations with them, we've had one-on-one conversation with corporate, and I think we're just fed up and we're tired of trying to talk to them, trying to get them to do something. And I want to be out here because a lot of those workers of color are still in there right now.
We asked the workers if they feared retaliation for speaking out. Many of them said they did not. We also asked several black employees if they had themselves experienced any racism, and they said that they had not. There's no black people out here with you.
Yeah.
And all the black workers kind of stayed inside. Why do you think that is?
I think honestly they're just scared. It's the very similar dynamic to what happened at our store. Only a handful of us actually went on strike, but there was a lot of support we had built up prior to that of getting workers to provide testimonies and incidences of sexual harassment or racism. And I believe Erica and Sarah did the same thing here, getting those testimonies from workers of color about the instances of racism and discrimination on the job. And to me, the fact that they would even participate to provide those testimonies is enough to show an endorsement of our effort. And I think, as a white person, it's our jobs to be out there struggling against white supremacy and against racism. And because, we got more leeway in that being white people. Me as a white man, I got more leeway in pushing that boundary than, say, you as a black man or a black woman. if black workers were out there with us at the sidewalk when the cops came, I don't necessarily know if that encounter would have been as friendly as it was.
They're afraid. Some of them were actually going to come out today. It might have just been a conflict of something else, but a lot of them are really scared to lose their jobs, and understandably so. I feel like if I have the privilege as a white person to, those police were very polite with me, and, I feel like if I can give some of my time to directly, communicating with you guys and communicating with management in there, I will do it. Because I've seen it myself. I've seen managers say very ableist things, very racist things about team members, and I'm not down with that at all. I've had my share of issues in the store, but I think what's more important and what's more pressing is the differential treatment of workers of color versus white workers in the store. And I think that's what we really want to focus on today. Yeah.
Their supporters gathered nearby this morning and then entered the store to do a mic check and address their supervisors with their demands. They say they have been working to address these conditions for months, but management failed to act, so they had to escalate. The workers then picketed outside and talked to customers. The action was ended shortly after it began right out front, when Baltimore County police officers showed up and asked the protesters to move to the corner. The workers have been working with the Democratic Socialists of America chapter in Baltimore.
This is actually the first effort beyond our store of trying to do joint work between Target workers at other stores.
How'd you get in touch with Erica?
We had actually been linked up through a Facebook group for retail workers, and we started holding regular meetings like every week, and we would just talk about what the issues were going on at our stores, and me sharing my experience about our manager engaging in sexual harassment, going on strike, getting him fired, and I think that kind of helped encourage them or inspire them to want to take action, do something similar at their store, because they're dealing with racism from their management and also some instances of sexual harassment as well. Right. So I just wanted to come up here and show support with them and offer whatever experience and wisdom that I might have that could help them in their efforts.
We are not trying to unionize at this point. I think we're kind of one of the, I'm working directly with Adam, who's, he had a strike at his Target in Christiansburg, Virginia. Okay. And it was against a manager that was racist and sexually harassing workers, and they were successful in getting him fired.
We spoke with management inside just a few moments ago. They were not willing to share any details or answer any questions, but they referred us to media relations, which is in Minnesota, and they claimed that they would be able to answer any of our questions. So here's what they had to say. We want everyone who works at Target to feel valued and respected and take any allegations of workplace misconduct seriously. We've been working for several weeks to address issues brought forth by team members at the Timonium store and have already taken actions to address them. We will continue to work closely with this store's new leadership to ensure the team member experience meets Target's workplace standards. We asked workers if they are considering joining a union. While Target is known for being anti-union and releasing this anti-union video a few years ago,
we feel strongly that once you learn the facts, you'll decide that having a union at Target might benefit the union because they could collect your dues.
But it's not in the best interest of the company or the team members.
Refuse to sign and keep Target union-free.
Erica says the workers are not really trying to unionize right now. They simply want to be respected as workers. This is Easy Jackson with Will Arenas, reporting from Timonium in Baltimore County.
Yeah, so in this story, as Khalilah was saying, you see a lot of white folks speaking about the issues of racism that they're seeing from their managers. And, Easy asks even, where are your black coworkers? Where are your black comrades out here? And some people responded that they thought they were too scared of the retaliation that they would get. But it would have been interesting, I think, to hear from the folks who were actually making these allegations as well, and to hear from them too. So we'll definitely keep following up on this.
Yeah, and you also hear that Me Too piece again, with claims of sexual harassment coming up, and them particularly calling out one of the managers for them accusing him of being handsy and doing some things that are inappropriate. So, I hope for the complaints that they've issued that there is at a minimum an investigation and follow up from the Target Corporation, but we'll see.
Yeah, it was interesting to be tipped off to something like this, because frequently when you hear about a labor issue, it's like at a smaller kind of shop, but this is like a chain that these specific workers were rising up, but again with some input and some solidarity from other Target workers too. So
I also think it's an interesting thing, right, that we're seeing in Baltimore, the surrounding areas, and across the country, people being exposed to actions like this, right, where you have someone in the middle of a Target doing a mic check, and people, kind of looking around like, what's that mean? Nothing's coming over the PA. Like, no, not that kind of mic check. We're about to school you on some things here.
Exactly. So. And again, check out the video so you can see what that looks like. It's pretty incredible to watch. Our next story is, man, this is kind of a heavy week. Our next story is another one from Taya and Steven, and it's about a man named Jerome Johnson, who was falsely imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit, which we see far too often in Baltimore and other places like Baltimore.
I want to juxtapose that and take a little digression. We have a 7-year-old, Taylor Hayes, who was shot and is fighting for her life this week. Safe communities are a really critical thing, right? And I think Baltimore is really grappling with maintaining the humanity of its residents while appropriately policing behaviors that really take away from the pride and the treasure that all of our communities have in it. And a 7-year-old is a real treasure. And, I want to lift up prayers for her family. I hope this baby girl pulls through, that we can experience her Black girl magic for a long time to come. But it's so interesting when you have the weight of a story like Jerome's, where he was falsely accused and spent all of this time in jail, and then it's juxtaposed against a young lady fighting for her life because someone did something like what he was accused of. They use a gun to resolve whatever issue they have, and here we have a baby who is fighting for her life. So
yeah, it's amazing to see people continue to fight for justice when there's so much that you're up against, and day after day, just blow after blow after blow. Today also would have been Philando Castile's birthday, and I think that every day that you can, each day that you wake up, there's a new injustice, there's a new just like act of racist terror really in this country to be alarmed by. So to keep fighting in the wake of all of these things, I think is really impressive.
It's a sign of a people resilient.
This is Taya Graham reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland. Today, we witnessed justice for Jerome Johnson, who was released from prison after 30 years of incarceration for a murder he did not commit. It's a scene outside Baltimore's Mitchell Courthouse that has become all too familiar. Another African-American man set free after spending several decades in jail for a crime he didn't commit. His name is Jerome Johnson. In 1988, he was wrongly convicted of shooting and killing a man inside a Baltimore liquor store. But since then, a key witness has proven unreliable, and the person who actually pulled the trigger signed an affidavit that Johnson was not the shooter nor present when the crime occurred.
Today, we stand in unison in pursuit of justice to announce the exoneration of Mr. Jerome Johnson, a man who has served more than 29 years of his life in prison for a murder he did not commit.
Adding to the exonerating evidence were several witnesses who provided an alibi for Johnson, which is why today prosecutors dropped the charges against Johnson during a brief hearing, and he emerged a free man.
All 4 eyewitnesses ultimately identified the shooter as Alvin Hill, who was rightfully convicted and sentenced to life. However, we now believe the sole eyewitness that implicated the involvement and presence of Mr. Johnson, which ultimately led to his conviction and incarceration of 29 years, was mistaken in their identification.
The long process that led to Johnson's release started with a series of 15 separate appeals, and finally a push from the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, which prompted State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby to drop the charges.
The result of the reinvestigation revealed that newly gathered exculpatory indirect and direct evidence that supports that Jerome Johnson was not present at the scene of this murder.
But this is not the first time a man has walked out of Mitchell Courthouse after being freed for a crime he didn't commit. The real news was there when another man, Lamar Johnson, was released after serving 14 years for a murder he didn't commit.
I'm just so blessed right now, and it's a wonderful feeling.
In 2004, he was charged and later convicted in the shooting death of Carlos Sawyer based on the testimony of 2 teen witnesses. It was another failure of the justice system that Lamar Johnson said needed serious reform.
I was treated like an animal in there, right? I was treated like an animal in there, right? It's rough in there. It's rough.
And that actually do save lives, as we know this jury don't always get it right.
But after decades of struggle to clear his name, today Jerome Johnson has one simple request.
Excuse me?
What's the first thing you want to do?
I think I'm going to get me a home-cooked meal. I think I'm going to do that.
I don't blame you.
A step towards normalcy for a man who has endured a lifetime of injustice. This is Taya Graham and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland.
So Jessel? Benjelis?
Cheers to Jessel. He is rocking and rolling on this gubernatorial campaign, and had an opportunity to converse with Benjelis this week and just talk about the road ahead for the November election. You know, Larry Hogan has come out guns blazing, and you have people who are Democrats for Hogan who I don't know what to make of them. We'll see what happens, but
yeah,
they had a good conversation about what Ben's plans are for, you know, getting people out. You know, we still see a level of voter turnout that is really not supportive of real democracy. You know?
We saw the higher early voting numbers, and I think a lot of folks were so excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, building interest in the democratic process, but then the numbers for the polls just dwindled the week after. So,
on the day of.
Yeah, on the day of.
So, you know, the question is going to be whether or not people will remain excited or even get more excited and turn out for Ben. Another question will be whether or not the other candidates will really turn up their own bases to get out and, you know, change the state house blue or turn the state house blue in light of an incumbent who is really well liked.
Yeah.
But being liked is not policy.
Yeah. It's really like an incredible rhetorician, an incredible politician that you can, you know, which does not mean anything good about his policies, but just has this way, Hogan, I think, has this way of packaging his policies in a way that seems really appealing to everyone. And I will have to see if Jealous is able to stand up to that.
Yeah, I think at a grassroots street level here in Baltimore, the question becomes whether or not people will follow the shiny ball or will they come out for their own best interests. So also want to see how Ben does in terms of a progressive running at a state level for a state house in this current political climate. And hopefully it'll send a flag to some other folk that they need to get in the race. If they have a good campaign and they have a message that people can stand behind, that they can win.
And to see how many of these reforms he really stands by. I mean, his
absolutely
his criminal justice proposals were really interesting. His call for Medicare for all, again, really interesting, compelling. But we'll have to see how much he's able to get done, how much pushback he's facing, and you know how much of these promises he actually sticks to. So
yeah,
we'll see how much the movement can hold him accountable to.
Yeah.
I'm Jess Lenore for the Real News Network. In a moment, we'll be joined by Ben Jealous live in our studio. But first, this quick report. Progressives have been winning big races across the country, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defeating longtime incumbent Congressman Joe Crowley in New York, to former NAACP head Ben Jealous emerging from a crowded field of gubernatorial candidates in the state of Maryland to secure the Democratic nomination. Jealous promises Medicare for all, taxing the rich to cover social programs, and legalizing pot to pay for universal pre-K, and a program that would offer public sector jobs to people the private sector won't hire. He'll face a formidable opponent in incumbent Larry Hogan in November. During the primary, Hogan out-fundraised all of his Democratic opponents combined and enjoys high favorability ratings even among Democrats. In response to Jealous's win, the Republican Governors Association released a statement calling him a, quote, radical activist, whose views make him unfit to serve as governor. They also said Jealous is promising to systematically undo all of the progress Maryland has made over the past 4 years by hiking taxes to never-seen-before levels in order to fund his radical pie-in-the-sky spending plans. So we're joined by Ben Jealous. You just won the Democratic nomination for governor last week. Yep. Congratulations on the win. And right after your victory, the Republicans have come out swinging.
They're scared.
Some might question using the words radical activist to describe the former head of the NAACP, but you know, they're
usually radical activists would question that. Like, what?
So they're arguing that things are going well under,
as far as they're concerned,
the
NAACP is the establishment. We've said from the beginning, I'm not running to the left, I'm not running towards the right, I'm running to the people of the state. I started off this campaign just listening to working families across the state, including folks who voted for Trump. And what you heard, and voted for Hogan, and what you heard again and again was that about 85% of the big kitchen table issues facing any family are the same as every other working family. Kids are coming out of college deep in debt. Healthcare costs keep skyrocketing. Under Larry Hogan, they're up more than 10% every year. Schools have fallen from 1st to 6th, but there's also just a sense of underlying fragility, that they're just not as well funded. A lot of frustration that the casino revenues weren't used, for instance, to significantly increase funding for the schools. The opiate crisis. Here in Baltimore City, killing more people than bullets by a long shot, and across the state. Terrifying. And so what I've done from the beginning of this campaign is just simply have the courage to level with the people and say, this is what it takes. I'm a lifelong community organizer, I'm a civil rights leader, I teach public policy, and I was trained by my grandma, who also helped train Barbara Mikulski. My grandma was a 101-year-old retired Maryland social worker, and she would always just say, look, baby, you can't half solve a problem, because you still got a problem. So I'm committed to giving the people of Maryland whole solutions to the real problems that face their families, and things we can do in real time to improve lives.
Now, it's going to be an uphill battle against Governor Hogan. He's the incumbent in the state. He said he's created 100,000 jobs. He says he's gotten the government off the backs and out of the pockets of people, of residents across Maryland. Things are going well. It's his argument. He even recently changed his Facebook page and his campaign Facebook profile to say Democrats for Hogan.
Yeah.
That's his argument, right?
He's scared.
Going for the Democratic votes.
He's scared. I mean, what he knows is this. The only way he got in office is we had the lowest Democratic turnout since 1942. And if we simply turn out Democrats at the level we did at 2010, there's virtually no way for him to win. What he also knows is that's what I specialize in. As the youngest president in the history of the NAACP, I was called the unsung hero of Obama's re-election by Van Jones on CNN. So we turn out 1.2 million unlikely voters. So we turn out those 2010 voters, we win. We turn out unlikely voters, we wallop them. And I've shown the ability to compete in every corner of the state. I won in 22 out of 24 counties. I was leading in the rural parts of the state for months. And so he knows that my brand of kind of kitchen table politics, focusing on fully funding education, getting healthcare costs truly under control by taking on every pharmaceutical company, by moving to state-based Medicare for all, ending mass incarceration, and using the money to bring down the cost of public higher education. He knows that there's a lot of people who want that. They're not just Democrats. They're independents, and they're even some of the folks who voted for him. And so I'll bring the fight to him, and we'll win.
A lot's been made across the country with wins like yours. We saw what happened in New York and in other states of progressive challengers taking on the establishment within the Democratic Party. So far, the majority of the Democratic Party of the state that didn't back you in the primary has come around and they've
everybody's on board.
Backed you.
Everybody's on board. I mean, you know, Francho, quite frankly, our concern was going to run in support of Hogan, and so the fact that he's staying neutral, I see as an improvement based on what our concern was. Everybody else is in support. Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen, all the Congress people who are Democrats, all but one. You know, the major county execs, past Governor O'Malley, all of them. I've worked with all these folks and worked well with them. I led the effort to abolish the death penalty, but also co-chaired the effort to pass the DREAM Act, help pass marriage equality, and a number of kind of smaller civil rights victories and some county-level victories around getting money out of politics. I brought John Sarbanes and I together, for example. And so we have a long series of relationships, and I feel good. And quite frankly, they also saw me win by a 10% margin, 22 out of 24 counties, so they know that my campaign has the energy to increase the vote, and that benefits all of us.
And your plans for places like Baltimore City, where we've seen endemic poverty for generations, that have been controlled by Democrats for generations, those plans to revitalize those areas have not gotten much attention in the press. Talk about what your vision is and how it's going to be different than you know, what's been happening for the last several decades, which doesn't seem like it's improving conditions very much.
It's not, and you know, Larry Hogan's been a real disappointment in that respect. I mean, under him, schools are down, healthcare costs are up, violence is up in Baltimore City, for example. Opiate deaths are up. The economy's stuck. People's incomes literally have risen by thousands in surrounding states in the last few years, but in Maryland, just by hundreds. And one of the things that's different about me that doesn't usually make the soundbite is I'm a tech investor. That's what I've done for the last 5 years. I invest in social impact tech companies, double bottom line. An example, Pigeonly, co-founded by a graduate of Morgan State. It's cut the cost of your loved one calling home from prison by 80%. It serves about 30% of federal inmates, now expanding into state facilities. And 68% of our companies have a black, Latino, or female founder. In fact, the fastest growing one, a woman named Ana Roca Castro, she's all above. She's Afro-Dominicana. And so what I know is that Maryland can build a much more robust economy. It means we're going to have a plan. You know, Terry McAuliffe, I think somewhat surprisingly, attracted a bunch of cybersecurity headquarters to Virginia that people expected to be in Maryland because we have NSA and Cyber Command. And then I said, you know, how'd you do that? He said, well, plan beats no plan. Your guy doesn't have a plan. We have Larry Hogan said that he would keep every Fortune 500 company here. And they thought, I don't know, magically, because maybe he's a Republican, he would do that. Well, he's already lost one. And what I know is that the bedrock of our economy are small businesses, including our startups, and we can keep a lot more of them here. We can grow more than we are, and we can become a leader, make Baltimore the capital of the green technology economy. We can make Maryland once again #3 in health sciences, while even building on some strengths like cybersecurity. And in the process, expand our economy in ways that Hogan has failed to do. When you look at medical cannabis, $200 million industry, blacks and Latinos completely locked out of the 24 licenses. When I'm governor, I will lead us in making cannabis legal for adult use, period. We'll regulate it, we'll tax it, but we'll also make sure that the entrepreneurs reflect the state.
Would you support something like what they're doing in Oakland, where former victims of mass incarceration are sort of first in line to get those licenses?
Absolutely. We have to make sure that the communities that have been most ravaged by the war on drugs benefit from shifting to saner policies and, frankly, pulling money out of the pockets of the cartels and the gangs and putting it in the pockets of farmers and business people. Absolutely. I think it's important to not just focus on ownership, but as you signaled, to also focus on the jobs. One of the ways you can do that is it's called micro zip code targeting. Your zip code, you typically think it was 5 digits, but it's actually 9 digits. And those last 4 digits after the dash can take you right down to like one part of a block. And so you can say, like, in these 9-digit zip codes, this is where the open-air drug markets have been. This is where the epicenter of the war on drugs has been. And we've got to hire people from those areas, too.
So many are expecting these midterm elections to be a referendum on Trump's presidency. We know that with the Supreme Court possibly changing, with Trump trying to appoint a new justice to replace Kennedy in the next few months before the election, a lot of people are going to come out and vote. Hogan has gone out of his way to distance himself from President Trump, even though he's a Republican. Do you think it's right to sort of tie those two figures together?
Hogan's tied himself to Trump's coattails via his lieutenants. Betsy DeVos, please come into our state. And then he mimics her by shifting tens of millions of dollars from our general fund, not to the public schools that are underfunded, but to private schools in the form of vouchers. Jeff Sessions, he literally parrots him on immigration policy and on incarceration policy, calling for a return to the failed truth in sentencing policies that are wildly expensive and implementing new mandatory minimums. And then on the Chesapeake Bay, Larry Hogan, more than any other Republican, could have blocked the appointment of Scott Pruitt, but he stood silent. All he had to do is say, hey, guys, I'm governor of Maryland, one of the most popular governors in the country. This dude's from Oklahoma, and he's already promised to destroy the Chesapeake Bay restoration plan. Instead, Larry Hogan tries to have it both ways. He takes credit for things really Obama did as far as cleaning up the Bay, while literally not only being a welcome mat for Scott Pruitt, just laying down and letting him be stepped all over, but also making it easier to pollute our Bay. The poultry industry invested $250,000 in helping to elect him his first day in office. He cut regulations to make it easier to literally dump chicken mess straight into the Bay.
Finally, we're almost out of time, but final question. We know that with the Supreme Court decision in Janus, it's going to hurt public sector unions, which backed you, in a big way in the primary. We know that working people across the state and this country are struggling. At Johns Hopkins Hospital, there's workers that are trying to form a union with the national nurses and who endorsed you. And they're saying that they're facing unfair labor practices. The hospital is denying it. What's your message to working people around the country and in the state of Maryland who are fighting for better work?
We need labor peace. Every working person has a right to organize. That needs to be respected. When it comes to public sector unions, I know what built my family's good fortune. Both my grandparents were able to become state workers here in Maryland, one a probation officer, the other social worker, and become members of AFSCME. My grandmother's a 101-year-old retired Maryland social worker. Under Larry Hogan, she's looking at her pharmaceutical prices jumping through the roof. I will make sure that people's pensions are protected, that they're well treated, that we frankly make their jobs less risky. Hogan has allowed there to become extreme shortages, including for corrections officers. I've talked to corrections officers who have their skull fractured multiple times, legs broken, and it's because they're understaffed, and he's done nothing on that. So I'll have the back of working people. I'll have the back of people who want to organize. Not only am I a grandson of two proud union members, I'm a former union member myself, and I know that working people deserve the right to bargain for a better wage. A quarter of our workers in this country, similar in Maryland, have to sign non-compete agreements, and I'm talking about when you're working for a fast food restaurant. So you literally cannot say, hey, they'll pay me 50 cents per hour more, why don't you pay me a quarter? They can't negotiate at all, and we've got to make sure that every worker has the right to advocate for themselves and to organize to get better wages and better treatment for their family.
All right, Ben Jealous, thank you so much for joining us. You are the Democratic nominee for governor of Maryland. We're going to be following this campaign really closely on therealnews.com, so watch all of our coverage. Check out our website, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching.
All right, so we'll keep, of course, watching this gubernatorial showdown in coming months. I'm sure we'll hear from Mr. Jealous again, and if anybody from the Hogan campaign happens to be listening, we would love to sit down with him as well.
Would love to sit down with him.
We have so many questions for him.
Yeah, he sounds like he believes he can represent everyone, and so the people want to know what makes him believe that, and we'd love to have him here.
Yeah, we want to thank y'all for listening. We want to thank our audio producer, David Hebden, and Stephen Frank, who is engineering in our control room right now, as well as Dwayne Gladden, who's our video producer. And we want to thank all of our colleagues at the Baltimore Bureau.
Thank you. And shout outs to our guy, Easy Jackson, who's
to Easy Jackson.
Send us out today.
How many times have you said, I'm never doing Molly again, or I'm never going party again, or I'm never calling his friend when the stress is calling you in? They seem to offer that escape. It seems to be the better way. Watch for the slippery slope, so quick to blame it on genetics, but you knew exactly where you was headed beforehand. The forehand split from punching glass and fits, a bunch of jabs that sit till text messages sent to smash riffs. We were made imperial, laid bathed in a miracle. 8th grade is a visual. I'm studying leaders who took it past physical. Silly ass niggas don't get it though. I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Fuck talking about a hater, I'll be rising above. Man, I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. I just love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Fuck rapping about a hater, I'll be rising above. Man, I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. I just love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Man, fuck it, make them call you, tell you thanks for the love. I see the poison in your arteries, I'm touching you there. I go and party where they give less than the fuck what you wear. I only fuck with those that I can trust my life around. I like the sound of talking, but action don't rhyme with Jackson, cause it's cute. And my passion ain't happening, it's just another thing to do. This kind of rapping just happens when you actively in pursuit of what the late greats inspired. Till today greats retired. I work to get my name in the running. Fuck that. Domino, I ain't come to get pushed back on the back rack where only the super nerds looking. I want the world to know that superb words exist. Can't be concerned with gossip or herbs, words dismissed. My business, one of your topics, I'm honored to make the list. I am street smart, book smart, hustle, blood in me. Can't give energy to any looking enemy. Can't give energy to any looking enemy. I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Fuck talking about a hater, I'll be rising above. Man, I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. I just love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Fuck rapping about a hater, I'll be rising above. Man, I love it when they call saying thanks for the love. I just love it when they call saying thanks for the love. Man, fuck it, make them call you, tell you thanks